So I was watching a live stream where they were talking about different weapons that have been banned by the United Nations. They've been banned by the Geneva Convention, outlawed by the Hague Convention. Different countries have said that they no longer keep these weapons in their arsenal. They no longer use these weapons. And the reason behind it is because they're so horrific that they're inhumane and they shouldn't be used. That the way they kill somebody is horrible, and if it doesn't kill them right away, or it doesn't kill them when it maims them, it causes a lot of pain, and it's horrific. If a surgeon is trying to save their life, that they're going to have a difficult time doing it because of the way this weapon affects the human body, and these things are just terrible. Now, with a few exceptions, I don't know that I agree with that. I don't think that I agree with weapons being banned by politicians and diplomats. I just don't. If the military wants to stop using weapons because they don't think they're effective, they don't, whether it be cost or the way it functions, it's no longer viable in the modern battlefield or something like that, I understand that. If the military thinks that this weapon is too dangerous to store or transport, or that it's just that terrible, then I think it's up to the military to decide not to use it or to limit its use or that sort of thing. But I really don't like diplomats kind of making up these sorts of things, because they have no place on the battlefield and they really don't know what war is like. They don't. Here's the thing. Lots of people have invented weapons, not because they were looking to profit, not because they were warmongers or anything else like that. They invented a weapon that they thought was going to be so terrible that it would stop fighting. It would actually get the fighting to stop. People would be so afraid of this weapon that they say, forget it. We're not going into battle against that. We'll just not fight. We'll find other solutions, diplomatic solutions or whatever, right? That's never worked. That's never worked. All it's done is made killing more efficient, or it's made it more brutal. It really has. And the thing is that there are people out there that are sadistical, and they will do terrible things. There are people that have committed war crimes. Maybe they weren't in their right mind at that particular time, or maybe they were in their right mind, and that's just who they are. Sometimes criminals actually go to war. And then there are people that see these sorts of things, and they're so horrified by them that they don't ever want to be around a weapon again in their life after they're out of the military. And I will tell you this, a young man's perspective and an old man's perspective are definitely different. As a young man, I was very idealistic and, just gung-ho, hard-charging and all this other stuff. And as I've gotten older, I've realized that in war, everybody loses, all sides. And it's terrible that anybody lost their life, in most cases. That doesn't mean that I don't think we should have war. Human beings have waged war as long as we've been around, and we will wage war right to the very end. If you believe the Bible, we definitely will. So war is a part of our nature. It's always going to happen. So here's the thing. Why not have the best weapons and have the best people who know how to use them? I'm not saying necessarily that you must use them. But if you have them, you maintain them, and you train like you fight and fight like you train, you will have an effective fighting force. And that fighting force needs to be ready at a moment's notice to protect the homeland or deploy abroad. And it's going to cost quite a bit of money, and not everybody is cut out for it, so I don't believe that it should be a force of conscripts. I really don't. I think it should be an all-volunteer force, because the performance will be better when they have their heart in it, where they want to be there, as opposed to being forced to be there. Although sometimes conscripts have done well, and sometimes volunteers have said, what have I gotten myself into, right? So it's not 100% foolproof. But overall, that deterrent, that not only do we have the tools, but we have the talent to use it, is enough to tell your enemies, don't mess with us. And the fact that you do training all the time, and you make it publicly known, and you train abroad with your allies, and the troop movements you're doing could just be regular training exercises. But the general public doesn't know that. The news doesn't know that. Hell, even your potential enemies don't know that. The military actually moves things around in certain ways because they know people are watching with satellites, and they're not sure. Are they about to deploy to war, or are they just moving assets around? Seriously. And there's other things like that that are behind the scenes that just aren't public knowledge, or they're not transparent. And I get it. As a big a proponent of transparency that I am, I understand the need for some secrecy or some cloak and dagger with our military, because it keeps our enemies on their toes. And that's what it's all about. But I just don't think that outlawing certain weapons is the way to do it. If war wasn't terrible, then we'd always be at war. And some people might go, it seems like we always are at war. No, we're not. War is terrible for a reason, so you don't do it. Now, weapons of mass destruction are another thing. There are people out there who don't understand nuclear weapons. They don't understand their value. They don't understand how they work. And nuclear weapons are a necessary evil. They are a deterrent. They are so terrible that everybody who has them doesn't want to use them because they know it means the end of the world. It does. Even if you use it on a limited basis, it's probably not going to end up too well. Anybody who launches one will be retaliated by everybody else. It's just going to be a mess, and humanity probably won't come back from it. Even though there are tactical nuclear weapons, and there are ways to do limited strikes, it just probably will just snowball into something that we don't want. But if we get rid of our nuclear weapons, then the only people that will have them are our enemies, and they will threaten us constantly with them. Hell, one day they might lose it and use them. But as long as we have them, it creates that deterrent. This is why gun control doesn't work. If you take away the weapons from the law-abiding citizens, the only ones with the weapons will be criminals and the government. And if you think that by taking it away from the citizens that you're going to remove them from the criminals' hands, the criminals will always find ways to arm themselves. Now the citizens can't protect themselves against criminals or a tyrannical government. That's why we have a Second Amendment. The same reason we have nuclear weapons. Seriously. And people who don't understand that are the people that are creating a problem in our country as far as understanding how important not only personal defense is, but national defense. It's a very important thing. It's an important thing for all countries. Just ask somebody who lives in a country where a bigger neighboring country has invaded them and the government's handing out weapons to them so they can fight street to street. Just ask them. Ask somebody who comes from a third world shithole where the only people in charge are the bullies with the guns because the citizens were disarmed a long time ago. So nuclear weapons have a place, and I do believe they're important assets to the strategic defense of America. Now, I am not a fan of chemical or biological weapons. They have way too many problems. A chemical, or I should say lethal chemical weapons, because there are non-lethal chemical weapons like tear gas, right? So if a lethal chemical weapon is deployed and the wind changes, it might come right back at you, right? That stuff is just it's too random. It's too dangerous. I just don't agree with the use of that. Biological weapons could literally spread across the globe, and I don't agree with them being used either. But I can understand why a country would have a stockpile of this stuff or have laboratories where they study this stuff. Because they've got it in case they ever need to use it, but they also have it so they can study it and find ways to defeat it, find ways to treat people who have been affected by it. So I understand the strategic importance of having secured labs where they research these sorts of things. And if you think these labs aren't good to have, I want you to think about it like this. Is there ever a situation where somebody has stolen chemical, biological, or nuclear weapons out of a facility that the government runs? Yeah, I know the government botches up a lot of stuff, but look at Fort Knox. Nobody's broken into that either. So there are ways to have reasonable precautions for securing these terrible weapons of mass destruction in the name of research. So I just don't know that I'm a big fan of banning certain types of weapons on the battlefield. And if the United States of America says you can say that you're not going to have these weapons, we are. I totally support our country because weapons are meant to kill. How they kill doesn't matter. They're meant to kill. And they're meant to be a deterrent. War is supposed to be terrible. It's supposed to be terrible so we don't ever do it again. But we just keep doing it. So if you want to be disarmed and a war breaks out, you're going to be fucked. Just my opinions as a veteran. Thanks for listening.